The sound of Marcus Rivera's fist connecting with Jonathan Blackwood's jaw echoed through the marble hallway like a gunshot. Blood sprayed across the pristine white wall as the billionaire's fiancé crumpled to the floor, his designer suit now wrinkled and stained. Security cameras captured every second, but they couldn't capture what Marcus had seen through the crack in the door, what had made a single father of two abandon his mop bucket, risk everything, and throw the punch that would either destroy his life or save someone else's. Just 60 seconds earlier, Marcus had been invisible, another night shift janitor in the towering glass monument to wealth that was Blackwood Industries. His reflection barely registered in the polished surfaces he cleaned, his footsteps muffled by expensive carpeting, his presence as forgettable as yesterday's newspaper. But sometimes being invisible means you see things others miss. And what Marcus Rivera saw that night would haunt him forever if he did nothing about it. The 42nd floor of the Blackwood Tower was supposed to be empty at 11 p.m. Marcus knew this because he'd been cleaning these halls for 8 months, working the graveyard shift so he could be home when his kids woke up, so he could make them breakfast and walk them to school before catching 3 hours of sleep and starting all over again. The executive offices were always dark by this time, the billionaires and their families long gone to their penthouses and mansions, leaving only the janitors and security guards to maintain their kingdom of glass and steel. But tonight was different. Tonight, light spilled from under the door of the conference room, adjacent to Victoria Blackwood's corner office. Marcus paused, mop in hand, listening. Voices, one he recognized, Jonathan Blackwood, the heir apparent to the Blackwood fortune, engaged to Victoria, always impeccably dressed and coldly polite to the staff. The other voice was softer, younger, trembling with an emotion Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Please, I just want to go home," the second voice whispered. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard that tone before, in his daughter Sophia's voice when she was scared, in his son Diego's voice during nightmares. It was the sound of a child trying to be brave when the world felt too big and too dangerous. He shouldn't have looked. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to mind his own business, to remember that people like him didn't get involved in the affairs of people like them. But Marcus Rivera was a father first, and fathers protect children even when those children aren't their own. The door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow gap, Marcus could see into the dimly lit conference room. What he saw made his blood freeze and his hands clench into fists. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching. I love hearing from you. Jonathan Blackwood stood over a small figure huddled in one of the massive leather chairs. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see it was a child, a girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, with dark hair falling across her face. She wore a school uniform, the kind from one of those expensive private academies, but it was rumpled now, as if she'd been wearing it far too long. Her small hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly, her knuckles were white. "You're not going anywhere until you learn to behave," Jonathan said, his voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty that only came from someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Your mother left very specific instructions about your education." The child, and Marcus could see now that she was indeed just a child, thin and fragile and terrified, tried to stand up. Jonathan placed a firm hand on her shoulder, pushing her back down. Not violent enough to leave a mark, but forceful enough to make his point clear. "I want my mom," the girl whispered, and Marcus's heart clenched. In that moment she sounded exactly like Sophia had last month when she'd gotten lost at the grocery store. "Your mother is in Switzerland, closing a very important deal," Jonathan replied. "She won't be back for 3 weeks, which gives us plenty of time to work on your attitude problem." Marcus knew he should leave. This wasn't his family, wasn't his business, wasn't his world. He was just the janitor, paid to clean floors and empty trash cans, not to interfere in the private matters of billionaires. He had his own children to think about, his own job to protect. Sophia needed new shoes for school, and Diego's asthma medication wasn't cheap. He couldn't afford to lose this job, couldn't afford to make enemies of the Blackwood family. But then Jonathan grabbed the child's chin, forcing her to look up at him, and Marcus saw her face clearly for the first time. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same sharp cheekbones as Victoria Blackwood, the same intelligent gray eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw that Marcus had seen in countless newspaper photos of the tech mogul. This was Victoria's daughter, Lily Blackwood, though Marcus had never seen her before tonight. Victoria kept her family life intensely private, rarely bringing her daughter to company events, never allowing photographers near the girl. "Your mother spoils you," Jonathan continued, his grip still firm on her chin. "But I'm going to teach you some discipline, starting tonight." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and something in Marcus Rivera snapped. It didn't matter that he was just the janitor. It didn't matter that the Blackwoods could destroy him with a single phone call. It didn't matter that he had his own family to protect. What mattered was that a child was in danger, and he was the only one who could help her. Marcus set down his mop bucket quietly, his mind racing. He needed to think this through, needed to be smart about this. Bursting in without a plan would only make things worse for everyone, especially the girl. But every second he waited was another second that child spent terrified and alone. He pulled out his phone, fingers trembling as he opened the camera app. Whatever happened next, he needed evidence. Nobody would believe the word of a janitor against the fiancé of one of the most powerful women in the city. But video footage was harder to dismiss. Through the crack in the door, he watched Jonathan pace around the chair where Lily sat frozen. The man was clearly agitated, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair, his designer suit rumpled from what had obviously been a long and frustrating evening. "You embarrassed me tonight," Jonathan said suddenly, whirling around to face the girl. "In front of very important people. Do you understand what you've done?" Lily's voice was barely audible. "I just wanted to call my mom. Your mother pays me to handle situations like this. She doesn't want to be bothered with your childish tantrums every time you don't get your way." Marcus felt sick. He'd met Victoria Blackwood a few times during his 8 months working here, brief encounters when she worked late and he was cleaning her office. She'd always been polite, even kind, thanking him for his work, asking about his family. She didn't seem like the type of mother who would leave her child with someone like Jonathan. But then again, Marcus had learned that rich people often wore masks that hid their true nature. Jonathan knelt down in front of Lily's chair, bringing his face level with hers. "Now, we're going to practice some exercises in obedience, and if you're a good girl, maybe I'll let you have dinner tomorrow." That was when Marcus noticed the empty plate on the conference table. The crumbs that suggested it had been the only food in the room for hours. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was systematic abuse. Jonathan wasn't just intimidating a child, he was starving her, isolating her, breaking her down piece by piece. Marcus's phone captured everything as he recorded through the gap in the door. Jonathan's threats, Lily's frightened responses, the clear power dynamic of an adult using his authority to terrorize a helpless child. But even as he gathered evidence, Marcus knew that waiting for justice through proper channels might be too late for Lily. Some situations required immediate action, consequences be damned. Jonathan stood up abruptly, walking to a small cabinet against the wall. When he turned back around, he was holding something that made Marcus's blood turn to ice, a leather strap, the kind used for discipline in the old days, the kind that left marks but healed quickly. Your mother believes in progressive parenting, Jonathan said, testing the flexibility of the strap with a small snap that echoed through the room. But I believe in results. Lily pressed herself deeper into the chair, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Please, I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. It's too late for promises, Jonathan replied. Actions have consequences. Stand up. That was the moment Marcus Rivera made his choice. He couldn't watch this happen. He couldn't stand by while a child was hurt, not when he had the power to stop it. His own children's faces flashed through his mind. Sophia's bright smile, Diego's trusting eyes, and he knew that if someone ever threatened them this way, he would want a stranger to step in and help. Marcus pocketed his phone, took a deep breath, and pushed open the conference room door. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Building security sent me to check on a disturbance." Jonathan spun around, the leather strap still in his hand. His face cycled through several emotions: surprise, anger, and finally, cold calculation. "There's no disturbance here, just a private family matter." "Didn't sound private from the hallway," Marcus replied, stepping into the room. He was a big man, made strong by years of physical labor, and he positioned himself between Jonathan and the child. "Maybe we should call Ms. Blackwood, make sure she's aware of what's happening here." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jonathan's face. "Victoria is in Switzerland. She's unreachable." "Funny thing about billionaires," Marcus said, his voice growing harder. "They're never really unreachable when it comes to their children. Why don't we give her a call just to be safe?" Jonathan's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. "Who the hell do you think you are? You're just the janitor. This is none of your concern." "Actually," Marcus said, glancing at Lily, who was staring at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Protecting kids is everyone's concern, especially when the kids can't protect themselves." That was when Jonathan made his mistake. Maybe it was arrogance, maybe it was panic, but instead of backing down, instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, he raised the leather strap and took a step toward Marcus. "Get out of my way," he snarled, "or I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Marcus looked at the strap, then at the man holding it, then at the terrified child behind him. He thought about his own job, his own family, his own future. He thought about Sophia and Diego sleeping safely at home, protected by locks and love and the knowledge that their father would always come home to them. And then he thought about Lily Blackwood, alone and afraid, with no one to protect her except a janitor who had stumbled into the wrong place at the right time. Marcus Rivera had never considered himself a hero. He was just a man trying to provide for his family, trying to make an honest living in a world that didn't offer many opportunities to someone with his background. But heroes aren't born from privilege or power. They're born from the simple decision to do what's right, even when it costs everything. The punch came fast and clean, a straight right hook that Jonathan never saw coming. Marcus had learned to fight in the neighborhoods where he grew up, where sometimes violence was the only language bullies understood. He'd hoped those days were behind him, but some skills never fade. Jonathan Blackwood hit the marble floor hard, blood streaming from his nose, his perfectly styled hair now disheveled and his designer suit ruined. The leather strap skittered across the polished surface, coming to rest under the conference table like evidence of a crime that would never be committed. For a moment, the room was completely silent except for the sound of Jonathan's labored breathing and Lily's quiet sobs. Marcus stood over the fallen man, his knuckles already beginning to swell, his mind racing through the implications of what he'd just done. He'd assaulted the fiancé of his boss. He'd attacked a member of one of the most powerful families in the city. He'd thrown away his job, his security, his children's future, all for a girl he'd never met before tonight. And yet, as he turned to look at Lily, still huddled in the chair but no longer cowering, her gray eyes wide with something that might have been gratitude, Marcus felt no regret. Some things were more important than job security. Some battles were worth fighting, even when you couldn't win. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, kneeling down to Lily's level. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her school uniform hung loose on her thin frame, the careful way she held herself as if she were used to being hurt. Lily nodded slowly, then whispered, "Are you going to get in trouble?" Marcus smiled despite everything. Even in her fear, she was worried about him, about the stranger who had risked everything to help her. "Probably," he said honestly, "but that's not your fault. None of this is your fault." Behind them, Jonathan groaned and tried to sit up, his hand pressed to his bleeding nose. "You have no idea what you've done," he slurred. "I'll destroy you. I'll destroy your family. You'll never work again." Marcus stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Jonathan's face. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you say the same?" The sound of running footsteps echoed from the hallway, security drawn by the noise or alerted by the building's surveillance system. In moments, this room would be flooded with guards and managers and lawyers, all working to protect the Blackwood family's interests. Marcus would be arrested, charged, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that Lily Blackwood was safe, at least for tonight. What mattered was that a child who had been powerless now knew that someone in the world cared enough to fight for her. Marcus turned back to Lily one last time. "When they ask you what happened here," he said quietly, "tell them the truth. All of it. Don't be afraid. You're braver than you know." The conference room door burst open, and 3 security guards rushed in, followed by Marcus's supervisor, Frank Morrison, whose face went pale when he saw the scene before him. "Jesus Christ, Rivera," Frank whispered. "What have you done?" Marcus looked down at his swollen knuckles, then at Jonathan Blackwood struggling to his feet, then at Lily watching everything with those intelligent gray eyes that missed nothing. "The right thing," Marcus said simply. "I did the right thing." As the security guards moved to restrain him, as Frank Morrison shouted questions he couldn't answer, as Jonathan Blackwood screamed threats that would probably come true, Marcus Rivera felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when it mattered most, when a child needed a hero, he had found the courage to step up. He had no idea that 3,000 miles away in Switzerland, Victoria Blackwood was about to receive a phone call that would change everything. He had no idea that the video on his phone, the evidence he'd gathered before throwing that punch, would become the key to unraveling a web of abuse and deception that went far deeper than one man's cruelty to one child. All Marcus knew was that he had protected an innocent child from harm, and whatever happened to him next, that would always be worth it. Sometimes being a hero meant wearing a cape and saving the world. Sometimes it meant being a single father who cleaned floors for a living and threw one perfect punch when it counted the most. As they led him away in handcuffs, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Lily Blackwood. She was standing now, no longer cowering, her chin raised in defiance that reminded him powerfully of her mother. She mouthed 2 words that made everything worthwhile. "Thank you." The door closed behind them, but Marcus carried those words with him as he was escorted toward what might be the end of everything he'd worked for. In saving one child, he had risked everything. Whether that gamble would pay off remained to be seen, but for now it was enough to know that he had chosen courage over comfort, justice over job security, and love over fear. The real story was just beginning. The Manhattan Central booking facility at 4 a.m., was a symphony of fluorescent lights and human misery. Marcus Rivera sat on a metal bench, his hands still cuffed behind his back, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor while trying not to think about Sofia and Diego waking up to find their father gone. His supervisor, Frank, had promised to call Marcus's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to watch the kids until he could figure out what came next, if there was a next. The booking officer, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, had been surprisingly gentle when she processed him. "Assault in the second degree," she'd said, quietly. "Could be looking at 7 years if they push for the maximum." She'd glanced at his file, noted his clean record, his steady employment, his children listed as emergency contacts. "You don't look like the type. What happened up there?" Marcus had just shaken his head. How could he explain that sometimes doing the right thing looked exactly like doing the wrong thing? How could he make anyone understand that the sound of a child's frightened voice was worth more than his own freedom? 3,000 miles away, Victoria Blackwood's phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand of her hotel suite in Zurich. She'd finally fallen asleep after 18 hours of negotiations, her mind still spinning with acquisition details and merger clauses. The deal she was closing would expand Blackwood Industries into 3 new European markets, potentially adding billions to the company's value. But when she saw "home emergency" flashing on her screen, none of that mattered anymore. "Ms. Blackwood?" The voice belonged to James Patterson, head of building security at Blackwood Tower. "I'm sorry to wake you, but there's been an incident involving your daughter." Victoria shot upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Is Lily hurt? What happened?" "She's physically unharmed," James said carefully. "But there was an altercation on the 42nd floor tonight. Your fiancé was assaulted by one of our janitorial staff. Mr. Blackwood is at Presbyterian Hospital being treated for a broken nose and possible concussion." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. Lily, Jonathan, assault. Her mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. "Where is my daughter now?" "She's here with me in the security office. She's asking for you, ma'am." "Put her on the phone." A moment later, Lily's small voice came through the line, and Victoria's heart clenched at how tired and frightened she sounded. "Mommy? Baby, I'm here. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay now," Lily whispered. "But Mommy, I need to tell you something. About Jonathan. About what he's been doing when you're away." Victoria's blood turned to ice. In the background, she could hear James Patterson quietly explaining something to someone, but all her focus was on her daughter's trembling voice. "Tell me everything, sweetheart. Take your time." For the next 20 minutes, Victoria listened as her 11-year-old daughter described weeks of systematic emotional abuse, missed meals as punishment, isolation in her room for hours at a time, verbal threats disguised as discipline, and tonight, the leather strap, the conference room, the very real fear that things were about to get much worse. "But the janitor man helped me," Lily said, her voice growing slightly stronger. "He saw what was happening and he stopped it. He said protecting kids is everyone's job." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what she'd just learned. She'd left her daughter, in the care of a man she'd thought she could trust, a man she'd been planning to marry, and he'd turned her child's life into a nightmare. Meanwhile, a stranger, an employee she probably barely noticed, had risked everything to protect Lily when Victoria herself had failed to see what was happening. "What's the janitor's name?" she asked quietly. "Marcus," Lily said. "Marcus Rivera. Mommy, they arrested him. They took him away in handcuffs because he hit Jonathan to protect me." Victoria closed her eyes, her mind already racing through legal strategies and damage control scenarios. But underneath the CEO's tactical thinking, a mother's fury was building, cold, focused, and absolutely relentless. Lily, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are not in trouble. None of this is your fault. I'm going to fix this. Do you understand? All of it. Are you coming home? Victoria was already reaching for her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as she booked the next flight out of Zurich. I'll be there in 12 hours. Mr. Patterson is going to take you to Aunt Sarah's house, and you're going to stay there until I get back, okay? After she hung up, Victoria sat in the dark hotel room for exactly 60 seconds, allowing herself 1 minute to feel the crushing guilt of having failed to protect her child. Then she stood up, activated every resource at her disposal, and prepared to rain down consequences on everyone who had hurt her daughter. Her first call was to David Chen, the best criminal defense attorney in New York. Her second was to her head of security, with instructions to pull every piece of surveillance footage from the past 6 months. Her third was to her personal assistant, with orders to compile a complete dossier on Marcus Rivera, employment history, family situation, financial status, everything. By the time her private jet was airborne, Victoria had already begun dismantling Jonathan Blackwood's life piece by piece. Bank accounts frozen pending investigation, access to family properties revoked, his position at Blackwood Industries terminated effective immediately. She would deal with the personal betrayal later. Right now, her only focus was ensuring that he could never hurt another child. Meanwhile, in a holding cell in Lower Manhattan, Marcus sat on a narrow bench and tried to calculate how much his bail might be. 7 years in prison would mean Sophia and Diego growing up without a father just like he had. It would mean Mrs. Chen trying to care for 2 additional children on her Social Security check. It would mean his kids entering the foster system, separated, lost in bureaucracy that didn't care about keeping siblings together. He'd known the risks when he threw that punch. He'd weighed his children's future against Lily Blackwood's immediate safety, and he'd made his choice. But now, in the harsh, fluorescent light of consequence, the weight of that decision pressed down on him like a physical thing. "Rivera," the guard's voice echoed off concrete walls. "You've got a visitor." Marcus looked up in surprise. It was barely dawn. Who could possibly be here to see him? His lawyer was court-appointed and wouldn't arrive until later. Mrs. Chen didn't drive and couldn't afford a taxi all the way downtown. The visitor turned out to be a woman in an expensive suit who looked like she hadn't slept in 24 hours. She had graying brown hair pulled back in a severe bun and intelligent eyes that studied Marcus with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen. "Mr. Rivera," she said, settling into the plastic chair across from him in the cramped visiting room. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm a private investigator hired by Victoria Blackwood to look into last night's incident." Marcus straightened. "Is Lily okay?" "She's safe," Elena confirmed, "and she's been very forthcoming about what she experienced. But I need to hear your side of the story. Everything you saw, everything you heard, everything that led to your decision to intervene." For the next hour, Marcus recounted the events of the previous night in careful detail. Elena took notes, asked clarifying questions, and occasionally nodded with what looked like approval. When he described finding the video on his phone, the footage he'd managed to record before entering the conference room, her eyes sharpened with interest. "The police confiscated your phone as evidence," she said, "but our technical team has already accessed the cloud backup. Mr. Rivera, do you understand what you captured?" Marcus shook his head. "I just thought if something happened to me, there should be proof of what I saw." Elena leaned forward. "What you captured is 23 minutes of Jonathan Blackwood systematically terrorizing a child. Threats, intimidation, physical restraint, and preparation for what appears to be imminent physical abuse. Combined with Lily's testimony and the medical evidence of malnutrition and stress-related symptoms, this recording is going to destroy any case the prosecution might have tried to build against you. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Does that mean... It means you're going home to your children today, Elena said firmly. Ms. Blackwood is personally ensuring that all charges against you are dropped and that you face no civil liability. She's also asked me to give you this. Elena slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery, Mr. Rivera. There are no words to express my gratitude for what you did to protect my daughter. While I was 3,000 miles away, focused on business deals and financial projections, you were the one who saw her fear and chose to act. You risked everything to keep her safe, when I failed to even recognize the danger. I would like to meet with you when I return from Switzerland. There are things we need to discuss about Lily's safety and your future. But for now, please know that your children's college educations are secured, your legal fees are covered, and your job, should you choose to keep it, is protected. You showed my daughter that there are still good people in the world who will fight for what's right, even when it costs them everything. That lesson is worth more than any amount of money I could offer. Thank you for being the hero Lily needed when she had no one else. Victoria Blackwood P.S. Lily asked me to tell you that she's been practicing being brave, just like you taught her. Marcus read the note twice, his hands trembling slightly. The weight that had been crushing his chest since last night began to lift, replaced by something he couldn't quite name. Relief, certainly, but also a kind of quiet pride. He'd done the right thing, and somehow, miraculously, it was going to work out. There's more, Elena said, watching his reaction. Ms. Blackwood would like to offer you a position in her personal security detail. Someone who can be trusted to put Lily's welfare above everything else. The salary would be substantial. Marcus looked up from the letter. I don't know anything about security work. You know about protecting children, Elena replied. And according to Lily, you know about making people feel safe when the world seems dangerous. Sometimes that's more valuable than any technical training. 2 hours later, Marcus walked out of central booking into the bright morning sunlight. His hands were no longer cuffed, his record was clean, and his phone, minus the crucial video evidence, had been returned to him. The first thing he did was call Mrs. Chen. Miho! Her voice was thick with relief. Are you okay? The children, they were so worried. I'm fine, Marcus said, his throat tight with emotion. I'm coming home. How are Sophia and Diego? They're strong, like their papa, but they missed you. Diego drew you a picture, a superhero with a mop instead of a cape. Marcus laughed despite everything. Tell them I'll be there in an hour. And Mrs. Chen, thank you for everything. The subway ride home gave Marcus time to process what had happened and what came next. In the span of 12 hours, he'd gone from invisible janitor to unemployed father to reluctant hero to, what? Personal security for one of the most powerful families in the city. The sudden change in trajectory was dizzying, but as the train rumbled through the tunnel toward his neighborhood in Queens, Marcus found himself thinking less about the job offer and more about Lily Blackwood, a scared little girl who'd been failed by the adults, who should have protected her, who'd found courage in the words of a stranger who saw her as someone worth fighting for. His apartment building looked exactly the same as it had 24 hours earlier, brick facade stained with decades of city grime, windows barred against break-ins, the perpetual smell of cooking oil and industrial disinfectant hanging in the stairwell. But somehow everything felt different. Marcus climbed the 3 flights to his door with a lightness in his step that had nothing to do with relief, and everything to do with the knowledge that he'd passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. Sofia and Diego were waiting in the hallway outside his apartment, having apparently been listening for his footsteps. They launched themselves at him with the enthusiasm of children who'd been afraid they might not see their father again. "Daddy!" Sofia wrapped her arms around his waist. "Mrs. Chen said you helped a little girl who was in trouble." Diego, always more serious than his sister, studied Marcus's face with 10-year-old intensity. "Are you going to get in trouble for helping?" Marcus knelt down to their level, gathering both children in his arms. "No, mijo. Sometimes when you do the right thing, it looks like you might get in trouble at first, but the truth always comes out eventually." "Like in the superhero movies," Sofia said decisively. "The good guys always win in the end." "Something like that," Marcus agreed, though he knew real life was more complicated than any comic book. Good guys didn't always win, and justice didn't always arrive in time to prevent tragedy, but sometimes, just sometimes, courage and kindness were enough to tip the scales. That afternoon, while the children napped, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table and reread Victoria Blackwood's letter. The offer was generous beyond anything he'd imagined. Enough money to move his family out of the neighborhood, where gunshots were more common than school funding. Enough to ensure Sofia and Diego had opportunities he'd never dreamed of providing. But it also meant entering a world he didn't understand, taking responsibility for a child who'd already been failed by people far more qualified than he was. Could a janitor from Queens really protect a billionaire's daughter? Did he have any idea what he was signing up for? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, Mr. Rivera, this is Victoria Blackwood." The voice was crisp, professional, but underneath the CEO's controlled tone, Marcus could hear something else: exhaustion, anger, and what sounded like gratitude. "Ms. Blackwood, thank you. For the letter, for dropping the charges, for everything." "I should be thanking you," Victoria said quietly. "You protected my daughter when I wasn't there to do it myself, when I'd unknowingly left her with a man who was hurting her." There was a long pause, and Marcus could hear the weight of guilt in her silence. He recognized it because he'd carried similar burdens, the constant worry that he wasn't doing enough, wasn't present enough, wasn't good enough for the children who depended on him. "Ms. Blackwood," he said gently, "you couldn't have known. People like Jonathan, they're good at hiding what they really are." "I should have seen the signs," Victoria replied, her voice tight with self-recrimination. "Lily lost weight. She became withdrawn. Her grades dropped. I attributed it to normal preteen adjustment issues, but the truth is I was too busy building an empire to notice my daughter was suffering." Marcus thought about his own children, about the nights he'd come home exhausted from double shifts, to find Sofia struggling with homework or Diego having nightmares. How many times had he been too tired to really listen, too worried about bills to notice the small signals that something was wrong? "Being a single parent is impossible," he said finally. "You try to be everything to your kids while also trying to provide for them. Something always suffers." "You sound like you speak from experience." "2 kids, 8 and 10. Their mother left when Diego was 2. I've been figuring it out as I go ever since." Another pause, this one more thoughtful. "Elena told you about the job offer." "She did. It's generous. More than generous, but I have to ask, why me? You could hire ex-military, former police, people with actual training in personal protection." Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer, less CEO and more mother. "Because when my daughter was in danger, when she needed someone to stand up for her, you didn't calculate the risks or weigh the potential consequences. You saw a child who needed help and you helped her. That's not something you can train. That's character." She paused, then continued. "Also, Lily asked for you specifically. She said she wants someone around who sees her as a real person, not just a rich man's daughter." I can't argue with that logic. Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest. In his neighborhood, children grew up fast, learned early to be suspicious of adults who might hurt them or let them down. Trust was precious and hard-earned. If Lily Blackwood, a girl who'd been betrayed by someone she should have been able to trust, was willing to trust him, maybe he was the right person for this job after all. "I'll do it," he said quietly, "but I have conditions. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Victoria sounded amused. "I'm listening. My kids come first, always. I'll protect Lily like she's my own daughter, but Sophia and Diego are my own children. If there's ever a conflict between their needs and the job, they win." "Understood. What else?" "I want to meet with Lily before I accept, not as her bodyguard, but as the person who's going to be around her every day. If she's not comfortable with me, if we don't click, then we figure out another arrangement." "That's wise," Victoria said approvingly. "She's been through enough. Her comfort and sense of safety are paramount." "And one more thing," Marcus said, his voice growing firmer. "I need to understand what happened to Jonathan. Is he going to face charges? Is he going to be a continued threat?" The temperature in Victoria's voice dropped 10 degrees. "Jonathan Blackwood is no longer a concern. His access to my family, my company, and my resources has been permanently revoked. As for charges..." She paused. "Let's just say that when someone hurts my daughter, I'm very thorough in my response." Marcus had no doubt that Victoria Blackwood's version of thorough would be comprehensive and devastating. He almost felt sorry for Jonathan. Almost. "When do you want to arrange the meeting with Lily?" "Tomorrow, if you're available. She's staying with my sister while I handle the aftermath of recent events, somewhere neutral where she feels safe." They agreed to meet at the Central Park Zoo, a place that felt non-threatening and allowed for easy conversation. After he hung up, Marcus sat in his quiet apartment and contemplated the enormous changes coming to his family's life. New job, new responsibilities, entry into a world of wealth and power that operated by rules he didn't understand. But at the center of it all was a simple truth. A child needed protection, and he was someone who could provide it. Everything else, the money, the status change, the complications, was secondary to that fundamental mission. That evening he cooked dinner for Sophia and Diego, helped them with homework, and tucked them into their beds like he did every night. But as he turned off the lights in their shared bedroom, Diego's sleepy voice stopped him. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Marcus paused in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light. "Yeah, mijo, we're going to be better than okay." "Promise?" "I promise." Outside their window, the city hummed with its usual symphony of sirens and car horns and late-night conversations drifting up from the street. But inside their small apartment, 3 people who'd learned to depend on each other slept peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would bring changes that would transform not just their circumstances, but their understanding of what family could mean when courage opened the door to connection. In a mansion on the Upper East Side, Lily Blackwood lay in her aunt's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the janitor who'd risked everything to protect her. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to sleep without nightmares, knowing that somewhere in the city, good people were working to ensure she'd never have to face her fears alone again. And in a hotel room overlooking the Hudson River, Victoria Blackwood reviewed security footage and legal documents and financial records, methodically building an airtight case that would ensure Jonathan never threatened another child again. But every few minutes she found herself looking at the photo on her phone. Lily smiling at last year's science fair, holding a trophy for her project on renewable energy, looking proud and happy and secure. She'd failed to protect that happiness once. She wouldn't make the same mistake again. Tomorrow, 3 damaged families would begin the process of becoming one unconventional but fiercely protective unit. It wouldn't be easy. Trust had to be rebuilt, boundaries established, and a new normal created from the wreckage of old assumptions. But sometimes the best families weren't the ones you were born into. Sometimes they were the ones forged in moments of crisis, held together by shared values rather than shared blood, strengthened by the knowledge that when it mattered most, everyone had chosen to show up for everyone else. The real work was just beginning, but the foundation, built on one man's willingness to throw a punch when a child needed saving, was solid enough to support whatever came next. The Central Park Zoo on a Tuesday morning felt like a sanctuary removed from the chaos of the city. Marcus arrived early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still as he waited near the sea lion pool. He'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, professional enough to show respect, casual enough not to intimidate an 11-year-old who'd already been through too much. Victoria Blackwood appeared precisely on time, walking with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command. But the woman approaching him looked different from the polished CEO he'd glimpsed in corporate hallways. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and sneakers, and exhaustion shadowed her eyes despite what had clearly been an expensive attempt to conceal it with makeup. Beside her, moving with the careful steps of someone still learning to trust the world again, was Lily. Marcus's first thought was how small she looked in daylight. In the conference room 3 nights ago, fear had made her seem fragile, but now he could see she was actually a sturdy kid, with her mother's intelligent gray eyes and an expression that suggested she missed very little. She wore a purple sweater and carried a small backpack decorated with planets and stars. "Mr. Rivera," Victoria said, extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to this." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Marcus replied, then looked down at Lily. "Hey there, how are you feeling?" Lily studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly to one side. "Better," she said finally. "Mom says you have kids too." "I do. Sophia's 8 and Diego's 10. They're in school right now, but they've been asking about you. They wanted me to make sure you were okay." Something in Lily's expression softened. "Really? Really? Sophia drew you a picture." Marcus pulled a folded piece of construction paper from his pocket. "She said every kid should have a superhero watching out for them." The drawing was classic 8-year-old art, stick figures with crayon hair and enormous smiles. But in Sophia's world, the superhero wore a janitor's uniform and carried both a mop and a cape, standing protectively in front of a smaller figure with long, dark hair. Lily smiled for the first time since Marcus had met her, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "She drew you as a superhero." "That's Sophia for you," Marcus said, grinning. "She's got a big imagination. Can I keep this? It's yours." They walked slowly through the zoo, past the penguins and polar bears, while Victoria hung back slightly, letting Marcus and Lily find their own rhythm. The conversation started carefully. Favorite animals, school subjects, books they'd both read, but gradually became more natural as Lily's wariness faded. "Mom says you might come work for us," Lily said as they watched the snow leopards pace in their enclosure. "That depends," Marcus replied honestly, "on whether you think it's a good idea." Lily was quiet for a long moment, studying the big cats with their fluid movements and watchful eyes. "Jonathan said he was protecting me too," she said finally, her voice small. "He said everything he did was to make me better, stronger, more disciplined." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What do you think about that?" "I think people who really want to protect you don't make you scared of them," Lily said, glancing up at him. "You made Jonathan scared, not me. That's different." The simple wisdom in her observation struck Marcus like a physical blow. This kid had been forced to grow up too fast, to develop survival instincts no 11-year-old should need. But she'd also retained something essential, the ability to distinguish between genuine protection and disguised control. "You're right," he said quietly. "Protecting someone should make them feel safer, not more afraid." "Would you make me feel safer?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with everything Lily had endured and everything she was hoping for. Marcus looked at this brave, damaged kid who was offering him her trust, despite every reason she had to withhold it. "I'd try my best," he said simply. "But if I ever made you uncomfortable, if you ever felt like I wasn't listening to you or wasn't treating you right, you could tell me to stop." And I would. Lily nodded slowly. "Jonathan never let me tell him to stop." "That's because Jonathan was wrong," Marcus said firmly. "You get to have a voice in your own life. You get to say when something doesn't feel right." They sat on a bench near the children's zoo, watching families with young kids interact with goats and sheep. Victoria joined them, settling beside her daughter with the careful movements of someone still learning how to read her child's emotional state. "So what do you think, baby?" Victoria asked gently. "How do you feel about Mr. Rivera working with us?" Lily looked back and forth between the adults, her expression serious. "I have questions." "Shoot," Marcus said. "Where would you live? Would you be there all the time? Would your kids come over? What happens if someone tries to hurt me again?" The questions came rapid fire, each one revealing another layer of anxiety beneath Lily's composed exterior. Marcus answered honestly. He'd need to move closer to their home. He'd work during school hours, and whenever Victoria traveled, Sophia and Diego would be part of the arrangement. And yes, he would absolutely prevent anyone from hurting her again. "But what if you can't?" Lily pressed. "What if you're not there, or what if someone is stronger than you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, recognizing the real fear behind the question. Lily had learned that the adults she trusted could fail her, could leave her vulnerable when she needed them most. No amount of reassurance would erase that knowledge overnight. "You're right that I can't be everywhere," he said finally. "And there might be situations where I need backup or help. But here's what I can promise. I will never leave you alone with someone who makes you feel unsafe. I will listen when you tell me something is wrong. And if I can't handle a situation myself, I'll get someone who can." "Like who?" "Like your mom. Like other security professionals. Like the police if necessary. The point isn't that I'm some kind of superhero who can handle everything alone. The point is that you'll never have to face danger alone again." Lily absorbed this, her young face working through the implications. "Okay," she said finally, "but I want to meet Sophia and Diego first, and I want them to like me." Marcus felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "They're going to love you," he said confidently. "Fair warning, though. Sophia's going to want to paint your nails, and Diego's going to quiz you about every book you've ever read." For the first time, Lily giggled. "That sounds nice." 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the doorway of a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, holding a box containing everything he owned that wasn't furniture. Victoria had purchased the building quietly through a shell company and converted the top 2 floors into a spacious apartment for Marcus and his children. The bottom floors housed Victoria and Lily, creating a living arrangement that was part family compound, part security setup, and entirely unprecedented in Marcus's experience. "This is really ours?" Sophia asked, bouncing from room to room like a pinball. "We get to live here forever?" "As long as Ms. Victoria needs us to help keep Lily safe," Marcus confirmed, though privately he suspected Victoria's generosity extended far beyond mere employment necessity. Diego, more cautious by nature, examined every detail with the thoroughness of a building inspector. "The walls are thick," he observed, "and look, all the windows have special locks." Marcus nodded. Victoria had spared no expense on security features, from reinforced doors to a sophisticated alarm system to bulletproof glass on the lower floors. But she'd also made sure the space felt like a home rather than a fortress, with warm colors, comfortable furniture, and enough room for 3 children to spread out and be themselves. The integration hadn't been without challenges. Sophia, naturally outgoing, had immediately adopted Lily as an honorary big sister, dragging her into elaborate games of dress-up and teaching her playground songs. Diego, protective of his family's new stability, had been more reserved until he discovered that Lily shared his love of science fiction and could discuss the physics of space travel with impressive sophistication. Lily, for her part, seemed to blossom under the attention of children who wanted nothing from her except friendship. She taught Sophia how to braid hair and helped Diego build increasingly complex Lego structures. She also, Marcus noticed, began to relax in ways that suggested she'd been holding herself rigid with tension for a very long time. But it was the small moments that convinced Marcus he'd made the right decision. Lily automatically setting 4 places at the table when she helped with dinner, Sophia insisting that Lily get the first choice of movies on family night, Diego quietly sharing his favorite books without being asked. The gradual emergence of something that looked suspiciously like a real family, cobbled together from necessity but sustained by genuine affection. Victoria, meanwhile, threw herself into the role of hands-on mother with the same intensity she'd once reserved for corporate acquisitions. She rearranged her schedule to be home for dinner most nights, attended school functions she'd previously missed, and carved out dedicated time for one-on-one conversations with Lily about everything from homework stress to friendship drama. "I think she's overcompensating," Marcus observed one evening, watching through the window as Victoria pushed Lily on the backyard swing for the 3rd time that week. "Maybe," his neighbor Sarah Chen agreed. Sarah had relocated from Queens along with the family, ostensibly as their housekeeper, but actually serving as grandmother figure to all 3 children. But overcompensating in the direction of presence is better than the alternative. Marcus couldn't argue with that logic. He'd seen too many parents, including his own, or in the opposite direction, leaving their children to raise themselves while pursuing careers or addictions or new relationships. If Victoria's guilt was driving her to be more involved in Lily's life, the result was still a more secure, happier child. The crisis came, as crises often do, from an unexpected direction. 3 months after the new living arrangement began, Marcus was walking Lily home from her piano lesson when he noticed the black sedan following them. Professional instinct, honed by weeks of security training Victoria had insisted on, made him alter their route slightly, taking 2 unnecessary turns to confirm his suspicions. The car stayed with them. Marcus's first thought was paparazzi. Victoria's engagement to Jonathan had been highly publicized, and their spectacular breakup had generated weeks of tabloid speculation. But photographers usually drove with less precision and more obvious equipment. His second thought was worse. "Lily," he said quietly, not breaking stride or looking back, "when I say so, I want you to walk into that coffee shop and ask them to call the police. Can you do that? Lily, to her credit, didn't panic or ask questions. Yes. Good girl. Not yet. Just be ready. They were still 4 blocks from home, on a stretch of sidewalk with limited cover and few people around. Marcus calculated distances and angles, weighing options. The smart play was to get Lily somewhere safe and let the police handle whatever this was. The protective play was to put himself between the threat and the child. The sedan's doors opened simultaneously when they were 50 feet from the coffee shop. 2 men emerged, moving with the purposeful coordination of professionals. They weren't dressed like law enforcement or private security. Expensive suits, Italian shoes, the kind of polished presentation that screamed corporate rather than tactical. But their positioning and approach suggested training, and the bulge under the first man's jacket indicated he was armed. Now, Marcus said quietly, and Lily immediately veered toward the coffee shop without looking back. Marcus kept walking, angling to intercept the men before they could follow her. His phone was already in his hand, speed dialing Victoria's number while trying to appear casual. "Mr. Rivera!" the first man called out, close enough now that Marcus could see his face clearly. Pale skin, receding hairline, cold blue eyes that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of Jonathan Blackwood. "We'd like a word." "I'm not interested in conversation," Marcus replied, still moving. "You gentlemen should probably head back to your car." "This concerns the Blackwood family," the second man said. "Specifically some recent misunderstandings that need to be clarified." Victoria's voice came through Marcus's earpiece. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "2 men, black sedan, following us home from Lily's lesson," he said quietly, keeping his eyes on the approaching figures. "Professional, but not police. Lily's secure." "Stay on the line," Victoria said tersely. "NYPD dispatch has been notified." The first man was close enough to speak in normal tones now. "There's no need for dramatics, Mr. Rivera. We simply want to discuss your testimony regarding the incident with Mr. Jonathan Blackwood." Understanding dawned like cold water down Marcus's spine. "Your lawyers." "Legal representatives," the second man confirmed. "Mr. Blackwood's family has some concerns about the narrative surrounding recent events. They believe there may have been misunderstandings that could be resolved through appropriate compensation." Marcus stopped walking. "You want to pay me to change my story?" "We want to ensure that all parties have access to the best possible legal representation," the first man said smoothly. "Sometimes, in the heat of the moment, people misinterpret situations. What appears to be appropriate discipline might be mistaken for something more sinister by someone unfamiliar with certain educational methodologies." The careful phrasing didn't disguise the underlying message. They wanted Marcus to recant his testimony, to claim he'd misunderstood what he'd seen, to help rehabilitate Jonathan Blackwood's reputation by destroying his own credibility. "The answer is no," Marcus said flatly. "The offer is quite generous," the second man pressed. "Enough to ensure your children's educational futures, to provide financial security for your family, all for a simple clarification of events." "I said no." The first man's professional facade slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "Mr. Rivera, you should understand that the Blackwood family has significant resources at their disposal, resources that could make your life very difficult if you choose to remain inflexible." Marcus felt the familiar cold anger he'd experienced in that conference room 3 months ago. These men were threatening his children to protect a child abuser. They were trying to use money and intimidation to silence the truth about what Jonathan had done to Lily. "Are you threatening my family?" Marcus asked quietly. "We're simply pointing out realities," the first man replied. "Single fathers in your position can face challenges in maintaining custody if questions arise about their stability or judgment. The threat was clear enough. Cooperate or face a legal battle that could result in Sofia and Diego being taken away. Marcus understood now why these men had chosen to approach him away from the house, away from witnesses where they could speak freely about consequences and leverage. What they hadn't counted on was that Marcus Rivera had already lost everything once and rebuilt from nothing. He'd already faced his worst fears and chosen courage over comfort, and he'd learned, in the aftermath of that choice, that sometimes the people with the most to lose were the ones with the least to fear. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to get back in your car and drive away. You're going to tell whoever sent you that I'm not interested in their money or their threats. And if I ever see either of you near my family again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." The second man stepped closer, his hand moving toward his jacket. "I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation." "I understand perfectly," Marcus replied. "You work for people who think money can buy silence about child abuse. You think you can intimidate a single father into betraying his principles. You're wrong on both counts." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The two men exchanged glances, professional calculation replacing aggressive posturing. They'd pushed as hard as they dared, without crossing lines that would bring serious legal consequences. "This isn't over," the first man said, as they began backing toward their car. "Yes, it is," Marcus corrected, "because the next time you want to have this conversation, you'll be dealing with Victoria Blackwood's legal team, and trust me, they're a lot less reasonable than I am." The sedan pulled away just as two police cruisers rounded the corner, their arrival perfectly timed to ensure the encounter ended without escalation. Marcus watched the car disappear into traffic, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and anger. "Daddy!" Lily burst out of the coffee shop, followed by Sofia and Diego, who must have been called by Victoria. All three children wrapped themselves around him in a tangle of relieved hugs and worried questions. "I'm okay," Marcus assured them, though his mind was already racing through implications and contingencies. "Everyone's okay." But even as he comforted the children, Marcus understood that the game had changed. Jonathan Blackwood's family wasn't content to let their son face the consequences of his actions quietly. They were willing to fight dirty, to threaten children, to use their resources to silence inconvenient truths. Victoria arrived 10 minutes later, her face pale with fury. After ensuring everyone was safe and giving statements to the police, she gathered the family in their living room for a conversation that would reshape all their lives. "I need you to know what we're facing," she said without preamble. "The Blackwoods are one of the oldest, most connected families in the city. They have judges in their pockets, politicians on their payroll, and enough money to make problems disappear. They will not stop trying to protect Jonathan, which means they will not stop targeting us." Lily, curled up next to Marcus on the couch, spoke in a small voice. "Are we in danger?" "We're prepared," Victoria corrected gently. "There's a difference. Marcus proved today that threats don't work on people who know what they're fighting for, but we need to be smarter, more careful, more united than ever." She turned to Marcus. "I want to increase security. Full-time protection detail, armored vehicles, safe house protocols. I know that's not the life you wanted for your children." "Our children," Marcus interrupted quietly. The correction surprised everyone, including himself. But once the words were out, he realized how true they felt. Sofia, Diego, and Lily, all three of them are our responsibility now. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "Our children," she agreed, "and I will use every resource at my disposal to keep them safe." That night, After the security briefings and safety protocols and contingency planning, Marcus tucked all 3 children into their beds, Lily in the apartment downstairs, Sophia and Diego in their rooms upstairs. Each child extracted promises that he would stay close, that the family would stick together, that the bad people wouldn't be allowed to hurt anyone they loved. "Daddy," Diego said as Marcus turned off his light, "are you scared?" Marcus considered lying, offering the kind of false reassurance adults usually gave children in uncertain times. Instead, he chose honesty. "Sometimes," he said, "when people you care about might be in danger, it's normal to feel scared. But being scared doesn't mean you stop fighting. It means you fight smarter." "Like you did today?" "Like I did today." Sophia's voice drifted from across the room. "Daddy, I'm glad we're a family now, all of us together." "Me too, mija," Marcus said softly. "Me too." Later, as Marcus stood on the roof deck, looking out over the lights of Brooklyn, Victoria joined him with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that mixed gratitude with determination. "Thank you," she said simply, "for protecting Lily today, for protecting all of us." "It's what family does," Marcus replied, accepting the coffee and the acknowledgement that they had, somehow, become exactly that. "The lawyers will keep coming," Victoria warned. "This was just the opening move. They'll try financial pressure next, then character assassination, then direct legal challenges. They want to break us down piece by piece until we're too exhausted to fight." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the city breathe beneath them. "Let them come," he said finally. "They're fighting to protect someone who hurt a child. We're fighting to protect 3 children who deserve better. I like our chances." Victoria smiled, the expression transforming her face from corporate warrior to protective mother. "So do I." In the distance, police sirens wailed their eternal city lullaby, but inside the brownstone, 3 children slept peacefully, protected by the knowledge that the adults in their lives would fight for them, no matter what it cost. The battle was far from over, but the battle lines were clear. On one side stood money, influence, and the protection of predators. On the other stood justice, truth, and a janitor who'd thrown one perfect punch when it mattered most. Marcus Rivera had started this fight to save one child from immediate danger. Now he found himself leading a makeshift family into a war that would determine whether courage could triumph over corruption, whether love could defeat money, and whether 3 damaged children could find the safety and security they deserved in a world that had already failed them once. The stakes couldn't be higher. The outcome couldn't be more uncertain. But as Victoria Blackwood and Marcus Rivera stood side by side on that roof deck, planning their strategy and counting their resources, one thing was absolutely clear. They would not back down. They would not give up. And they would never stop fighting for the children who had brought them together. Some families were born from love. Others were forged in fire. And sometimes the strongest bonds were the ones tempered by a shared commitment to stand between innocent children and the darkness that threatened to consume them. The real war was about to begin. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.